Looking at the couple of pieces that you put out just before coming in Cannes, spend is up, it looks like, at a global level. Where's that spend going, and why are you seeing that growth in media spend?
Yeah, well, I think the platforms, the digital platforms in particular, are the primary beneficiaries in pretty well every country around the world. And again, it's not just 2 or 3 players. It's more like 6, 7, 8, 9. Like the entities that are focused on the global opportunity associated with advertising tend to take share from those who are solely focused on single markets. And notwithstanding what's going on in the world in deglobalization, the globalization of media has really benefited, again, global players. You know, where's the money coming from and why? I mean, there's a number of factors. I think that you could look at categories like retailing, where e-commerce-based retail requires so much more advertising or causes so much advertising spending that even if you only have a modest growth or share shift from physical bricks and mortar stores to e-commerce, it does contribute to a pretty meaningful shift. You also have cross-border trades, notwithstanding the consequences of deglobalization and tariffs from the United States, that there's still a lot of cross-border advertising growth originating in China primarily that adds to the competitive intensity of the advertising industry. And then you just have notwithstanding this, you see that big sword right above us? It's about, 20 miles high, about 5 miles wide. It's dangling.
Yeah.
It's lovely out here, but this sword, it's just up there, right?
Yeah.
Still, everyone's spending money.
Yeah.
And so...
Are you surprised by that? Because your initial reporting when the tariffs hit, it created a lot of confusion in the global market, and we were thinking, what is going to happen from a consumer perspective? Living in Canada, the tariffs had a massive impact on consumer confidence, for example, and spend declined as a result. So you're a little bit surprised that with your recent outlook, actually there was a bounce back.
Let's be clear. I mean, going into 2025, we were negative on the ad market.
Yeah.
Negative in the sense of bringing down our growth estimates in a pretty meaningful way. The logic behind it held through the spring, and then of course so-called Liberation Day in the United States. That these were more or less predictable things. What was a surprise was that the hit to economies was not as bad as it probably should have been, in Canada included.
Yeah.
That while there are consequences that play out in the long term, this is not like the global financial crisis or the pandemic where there was a sudden meaningful drop. We weren't expecting that, but we were expecting something to appear in the short term. It hasn't happened yet. As the saying goes, the distinction between being wrong and being early is often indistinguishable. Mm-hmm. And so it's not that we're wrong. That sword right above us has just gotten bigger.
Yeah, so one of the chatters about at this event is about search and the so-called decline in Google's ability to continue to monetize it in the way they have. Do you subscribe to that? Do you think they're in trouble from their search budgets? Are search budgets moving elsewhere? What are you seeing in your data?
Generally, no, not yet. I think the fears are very forward-looking in the sense of anticipating what might happen.
Do you think it's more hope and optimism from other media suppliers?
It's more fear and loathing.
Right. So you're not seeing a shift to spend at all?
No, not yet. The reality is that the vast majority of spending on search originates from very small businesses who have a process that causes them to make an allocation that doesn't depend on whether or not Google search goes from 70% to 60% of all queries and whether or not OpenAI and Perplexity and others are taking growing share. And then, so that buys Google time to invest in its new product, new offering. The money doesn't change, it just shifts, but it only shifts when there's a sufficiently large alternative. We're nowhere close to that yet.
So everyone's saying there's going to be a massive shift of money coming out of search. If you forecast that for 12 months' time, what are you going to pin your hat on?
You'd have to bet that consumer search would shift dramatically, suddenly, to the alternative.
But that started to happen, though, hasn't it?
Started, yes, at a small scale, but not a very large one.
And you're seeing no change in the spend as of yet?
None that we can see.
Okay. Hey, do you want to put a prediction on what you think that?
No impact near term. There's no meaningful source of advertising sales from any of the newer generation search engines. Even if they had 10% of all query volumes, they don't have proper sales and proper distribution and proper products developed, that takes more than 12 months to develop and then socialize and then sell. You don't see any impact.
Okay, yeah, it's a very good point. So let's go on to my favorite topic, which is television. What's your outlook for the TV market in the next? They've come out here in Cannes, we're obviously on the RTL beach at the moment. There's been some good figures posted around the world. Viewership is holding well. Some spend data is coming. It's looking pretty positive. Are you pretty bullish about TV's opportunity in the next 12, 24 months?
No. I think that what we're seeing right now in markets where there is some growth, and even in the US where it's not negative by much, it's a bit of a mirage. If you've got an industry, first of all, if you've got an industry or sector growing by 0 or 1% in a broader industry growing by 8 or 9, it's not a great story. And I think that's often forgotten because that 8 or 9% number is not sustainable. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that where we are seeing some pockets of growth in Europe in particular, I think the thing to be concerned about is it's not that marketers are seeing the light differently and looking at television differently in Europe than they are in the US. They're still recovering to pre-pandemic levels in many cases. US already recovered from the pandemic by 2021 in terms of the return of spend. And then a decline started from there. I think that it's not about effectiveness. That's the other thing. In nowhere is it about whether or not television is more effective than alternatives. If effectiveness was what drove advertising, direct mail would be a bigger category. If
You've always argued that,
radio would be a bigger medium.
Yeah.
It's not about effectiveness.
But you could be more positive about it because if you think about it, we've had declines in television and now we're seeing it level off and some growth, even though the growth's minimal. Surely that speaks to
I think we're
an
still
optimistic outlook.
That is an optimistic outlook. I think we're still seeing recovery is my point.
Yeah.
And I think that the underlying trends are not different. When we tried to look, certainly when I worked inside of Group M and we published some of this work, when we tried to look at like-for-like advertiser budget allocations, the shifts away from television were pretty universal around the world.
Yes.
Over multi-year periods of time. And when you look at that data and you anticipate that the total ad market cannot grow at the rate it has been growing. I mean, if it did, arguably, eventually it becomes the world economy. Not bad if that means we get to spend more time on the speech in Cannes, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is that the trends disfavoring television, including connected TV, are not positive. Again, independent of its effectiveness.
But do you think advertisers moved? There was this great line that we moved away from TV before the viewers did. Spend moved quicker than viewership.
That's almost certainly true in many countries, European markets in particular. But I think that you can argue it's difficult to say what the right level of spend would have been to begin with.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things that you published that I really, really like is the views from the CEOs and the CFOs. And what are they saying when it comes to media spend? It looks like a lot of it is incredibly positive towards looking at media spend or advertising as a investment rather than a cost. Are you seeing that shift at that level?
I don't agree with that. I know the narrative exists. And I think that even if marketers, CFOs, CEOs talk about it, I don't believe that they act that way.
Okay.
So
they say the right things, but they don't mean it.
Yeah.
They're treating it as a cost.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, Brian, it's been brilliant chatting to you. Thank you very much for doing it.
As always.